This is Brian Robertson, and today's date is May the 14th, 2009, and we're in Conway, Arkansas doing an interview for the Arkansas Korean War Project.
And I'm Gilbert Depner, and I live at number 7 L.A. Lane, Conway, Arkansas.
And what branch of service were you in, Mr. Depner?
I was in the 1st Marine Division in Korea,
Okay.
1949 or 1950 to 51.
Okay. So let me ask you a little bit about, just about you, Mr. Depner. Where were you born, and who were your parents?
I was born in Farmington, Montana, on December the 13th in 1930. My dad was Martin Depner and my mother was Emily. And I had 4 brothers and sisters. Well, actually half brothers and sisters, but we all lived on a farm in Farmington, Montana.
What? Well, that's appropriate, a farm in Farmington.
Yes.
What did you farm?
It's wheat.
Wheat?
At one time we had about 750 acres.
Wow. Now, what part of the state is Farmington?
It's 50 miles north of Great Falls,
Okay.
which is in north central.
Right.
About 90 miles from the Canadian border.
Okay. All right. And so, what was life like growing up there?
Well, it's pretty much like any farm life. You have a regular routine. Of course, we had cows to milk and other livestock, hogs and chickens and everything. So each one of us had certain chores that we had to do each day, and it was peaceful, quiet type of life. You didn't. I was born in 1930, which is Depression time anyway.
Right.
So we didn't go and do very much, but I had my brothers and sisters were all older than I am, and so they pretty well took care of me, told me what to do and when to do it.
That's what older brothers and sisters do, especially brothers. So I assume you graduated. Did you go to high school in Farmington?
It was Shelter, Montana.
Okay.
It was Teton County High School, and in 1948 they changed it from Teton County High School to Shuttle High School, and I graduated in 1948. Pretty much the average type person.
So what did you do after you graduated from high school?
Well, I worked on farms for different people, and in 1949 I kind of got to where I was looking for something more steady, and there's not much industrial work to be had in that particular part of the country. So I had been interested in the Marine Corps for several years. My brother had been in the Marine Corps during World War II, and so I just kind of fell into following in his footsteps, and so I joined the Marine Corps just after Thanksgiving in 1949.
So what did your parents think about that?
Well, Mother wasn't too pleased, but she was willing to go along with it. I was 18 and I knew what I wanted to do, so she went along with it. And she wasn't really happy about it, but she didn't complain. she never did complain very much about anything.
So you joined up, and what happened next? I assume you went to basic training somewhere.
Well, I joined Great Falls, Montana.
Okay.
And I had to wait, I think, 2 days, if I remember correctly. And there were 2 other fellas from the state of Montana that went to boot camp at the same time I did. And since I was farthest north, they put me in charge of the detail. So I had 3 of us that we went to the Marine Corps Recruit Depot in San Diego, California. And we were in at the holiday season, so because of that, we had to spend 2 extra weeks in boot camp, which wasn't exactly a privilege, but I went through boot camp, and there was another recruit platoon that went to about the same time, and so we were in competition all the time to, be the best,
right?
Whatever. But after I got through boot camp, I spent a couple of weeks in receiving barracks in San Diego, and they sent me to motor transport school. And so I had a detail that was assigned to me. We went from San Diego to Chicago, and then south to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. I was the only one that was in the motor transport, but the other 2 were cooks, and they went to cook school in Camp Lejeune.
So what did you think of these different places? Being a small town in Montana, Montana's very different from San Diego.
Yes, it was, but actually, we weren't given any privileges, so
right.
I didn't see much of San Diego. I mean, outside of being at the recruit depot, that's as far as you went. They told you what to do and when to do it. And
I guess the weather was a little different, though.
Yeah, the weather was much different. It was, nice Southern California weather, and of course it was altogether different from what I had experienced in Montana. But
especially during wintertime, I imagine.
You bet. It was much nicer in California. A lot nicer.
So you ended up in Camp Lejeune Motor Transport School, right?
Right.
So how did that go?
Well, we had some barracks on Camp Lejeune. Of course, Camp Lejeune at that time is much different from what it is today. But we had there were cooks barracks, there was motor transport barracks, there was women Marine barracks, and there were several of them. We were kind of on the outskirt edge of Camp Lejeune, and each day the students that were in the barracks marched to where the transport school was, which is I'd say about half a mile from the barracks. And we went through mechanic school. I mean, that was what I was trained to do. And we went through, tore vehicles completely down and then put them back together and made them run. And I had planned, since I had graduated where I did in motor transport school, that I was going to go to diesel mechanics school, which is just right next door to where I was. I mean, I was planning on that, but it didn't work out that way.
Now, why didn't it work out that way?
Well, in the Marine Corps, you go where you're needed.
Right.
And at that particular time, the week that I graduated was when North Korea invaded South Korea. And so they immediately put everybody that was available into the 1st Marine Division. And
so what did you think about that once you guys heard that North...
Well, I was disappointed, to say the very least. But
Right.
then you don't have any choice, you know, as to what you're going to do. So we went by troop train to Camp Pendleton. From there, we went across to Kobe, Japan. We were in the Kobe, Japan, I think about 2 days, and then we shipped out from there to Incheon.
Well, what was the trip like from Camp Lejeune to Camp Pendleton?
Well, we were put on a troop train, and it was a slow moving train. It took us about a week to go from Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, to Camp Pendleton, California. I don't really know how many cars there were in the train, but there were probably, I'm going to say 30 or 40. And different units from Camp Lejeune that had been put in. And I don't know, there's a possibility that there were some from other Marine stations in North Carolina. I don't really know who all was on the train, but I knew there were quite a few besides our particular group. And we were, I think there were just about 30 of us in my class. And I didn't know anybody else, you know, that was in the troop train except my classmates that were with me. And we didn't know at the time what we were going to do when we got there.
Right.
You know, some of the class members were signed to Easy Company, and some were Dog Company, and some were Fox Company, and one of them was a chauffeur for the commandant of the 7th Regiment, and he ended up in Dog Company too. But I was the only one out of the group that ended up in Weapons Company. And all the rest of them went to different places in 7th Marine Regiment.
So once you got to San Diego, I guess you loaded up on a ship?
Right. I was assigned to Weapons Company about 2 days, and we were assigned to different areas, you know, that when they loaded up the troop transport, we had tanks, jeeps, trucks, everything, you know, that was part of the 7th Regiment. And companies had places where they slept down in different holes down in the ship. But I was assigned a weapons company, and we were billeted on the forward part of the ship on deck, and we had cots that we lashed to the different parts of the ship. The one that I had was on the forward crane. We tied to the railing that went to the side of that, and I was on ship about 3 days, and they finally told me what I was going to do. And they had assigned me to anti-tank, and we had missiles, rocket launchers that we were supposed to fire. I never had fired one before, but anyway, we had 3.5 rocket launchers, and I guess about a week after I was on ship, they assigned this fella to be my assistant gunner, and I really don't know what he had been attached to, but the night before we were supposed to leave, why, he went AWOL, AWOL, and of course the MPs picked him up and they put him in the brig on the ship. So after about a week aboard ship, they turned him loose and assigned him to me.
That doesn't sound like a good deal for you.
Anyway, they issued me this rocket launcher, and we went to the aft part of the ship and put a missile in it, and a rocket, and fired it off over the tail of the ship out in the ocean somewhere. But that was the only training that I had as far as the rocket launches was concerned.
Well, that's something.
And so I had, that's what I carried when I first went ashore in Incheon.
What was it? Let me back up just a second. What was it like on the ship, on the trip over? Did you have a nice, smooth, leisurely trip?
I don't remember how many. It seemed to me like we was almost 2 weeks on ship going across. And the last week we had a typhoon, and there was one other ship that went with us that had the first regiment in, and we kind of went along together. But there were some times during that typhoon when we couldn't see that ship.
I bet you.
We were going up and down, and they were ahead of us, so to speak, and we followed along. We finally went through between the two islands in Japan, went to the west coast of Japan, where Kobe seaport was, and while we was there, we were given 2 days liberty, I think, the 2 days that we were there. And
what was the you had mentioned before about what it was like on the ship in regard to some grease and stuff about. Can you talk about that for a second?
This AKA ship that we were aboard had been put in dry dock, and I guess had been out of service for several months. I don't know the history of that, but anyway, they called it out of dry dock to take us over, and everything on the deck topside was just literally covered with grease, you know, about a half an inch thick. And the rest of the ship was bad need of repair, you know, paint. And sailors would have to chip paint every day. We'd see them, you know, on the deck trying to chip the paint up and do the best they could. And the second day that we were out, why, the evaporator broke, so we didn't have any fresh water. Well, I couldn't say we didn't have any, but we didn't have much, so we didn't have, we couldn't take a shower unless we took it in seawater. They pumped seawater, you know, to flush the toilets and do the showers and that sort of thing. But there wasn't any fresh water except for cooking, and they had a water fountain amidship, and it would just barely put out enough, you know, so you kind of suck it up. But it wasn't like an ordinary water fountain. And of course, everybody, well, I don't say everybody, but about 50% of the people on board got seasick, and that didn't help very much when it got mixed with the grease on board, and it was pretty much a mess.
Yeah, I can imagine.
We made it through anyway.
And you landed in Japan.
Right. And after 2 days in Kobe, why, we loaded back on board ship and went to Incheon. And that was on September the 19th in 1950. So,
what was that like?
Well, the 1st Marine Division landed at Incheon, and of course there was heavy bombardment and everything before we went ashore. And fortunately, I wasn't in the first wave. That filled of the 1st and 5th regiments. They went in Incheon first, and they attacked Seoul, the capital city. And the 7th Regiment, when we went in, we loaded on the amphibious tanks and went in, and we went north and took Kimpo Airport. That was our
objective.
Yeah. And so we went north and secured Kimpo Airport, and then about, well, from there on it is something every day different. You know, we had to cross the Han River, and then is up one hill and down another. You know, I mean, every day we had a certain hill that we had to take. And weapons company was such that you were assigned one squad to one company. So maybe on one day we'd be with Easy Company, and the next day we'd be with Dog Company and Fox or whatever. We were assigned to different companies, I mean, each and every day. And I don't remember exactly how long it was, but I'm going to say about a month. Why, all of the Korean Army had lost all of their tanks, so there wasn't any need of having an anti-tank platoon anymore. So they issued us light machine guns. And so from then on, I was assigned a gunner of a light machine gun.
Is that a 30 caliber?
Yeah,
Yeah.
air cooled.
Mm-hmm.
Now we had a heavy machine guns, but water cooled.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a different platoon from mine.
Mm-hmm.
But we carried the light machine gun then from that time. I got to fire my rocket launcher one time while I was over there. It wasn't at her tank; it was at her Jeep that was going down, and it was out of range, and I didn't have any scores. But anyway, we got the light machine guns, and we carried them the rest of the way while I was there until after Incheon. I mean, after Chosen Reservoir.
Was that pretty heavy? How heavy was that gun? You remember?
About 50 pounds.
That sounds pretty heavy.
Yeah, pretty heavy when you...
Especially if you're going up and down hills.
Yeah, and besides that, you had to have your pack and, you know, bedroll and everything with it. Most of the time, when we were about 100 to 125 pounds, depending on whether or not we had to carry an extra box of shells or not. We had 3 men to a crew, really. One carried the machine gun, one carried the tripod, and the other carried usually 2 boxes of ammo. And then sometimes, if we, you know, were expecting pretty heavy skirmish or some kind, we'd maybe have to carry an extra with the machine gun. But most of the time, he was about 150, 125, 150 pounds. And he got pretty heavy going up hills.
Yeah. Were there any guys over there that you had known from before, from either boot camp or anything?
Well, yeah. I had, when I was on ship, I met one boy that he was in the reserves in Montana.
Oh, okay.
And he was an ex-girlfriend's brother. And so I got to meet him while he was on the ship, because we didn't have anything else to do. But I got to talk to him several times. And I was kind of disappointed because he hadn't been in the reserves for maybe 6 weeks, and he'd never had any training of any kind. And so when he was over there, he was assigned to an infantry regiment, Easy Company, and they were part of the company that went to take Kimpo Airport, and he didn't last that night. And I really felt bad about that, because you know, it's just kind of hard for a young high school kid just out of high school, never had any training.
Right.
I mean, it wasn't that he hadn't gone hunting or anything like that. He knew how to fire, you know, a weapon, but he hadn't had any combat training.
Right.
You know, and so he was thrown into that kind of a situation without any training, and I really felt bad about that.
Right. You remember what his name was?
His name was McCann,
Okay.
and he was from Fairfield, Montana, which is, man, Fairfield is about 20 miles from Shoto, and part of the county system, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was in high school, I dated his sister a couple of times, and she was kin to one of my neighbors, and you know, all that sort of thing. But anyway, I really felt bad about his situation because he'd never been trained to do anything, you know, as far as combat.
You never really had a chance, huh?
Right.
Yeah.
I think if I remember right, he had attended 2 monthly training sessions at the reserves, and so he didn't really have much of a chance.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it had anything to do with it or not. I don't know the exact situation, you know, that he was in, but I do know that he was killed at first.
Mm-hmm.
The first time, you know, the first combat that we faced.
Right. So after you landed at Incheon, they took Kempo, went to the Han River. What happened after that?
Well, we were assigned, you know, take this hill and that hill and that hill. Just about one hill a day, you know. And then after about time, I can't remember, but I'm going to say 2 months, something like that. Why, we were replaced on the front line at that time, and they took us back to Incheon, loaded us on LST, and we sailed around the southern part of Korea and up the east side. We were supposed to make an amphibious landing at Wonsan, and the harbor was filled with mines, according to what they told us. So we'd go up one day, down the next day, up one day, down the next way. We went back and forth there for, I'm going to say, a week, and the weather was terrible. I mean, it was choppy, you know, windy, and the waves were pretty high. And when those LSTs go up, I mean, they'd come down with it'd shock you, you know, just jolt you. And of course, everything down in the hold was filled with tanks. And when those tanks would go up and down, you know, they slap just like they was gonna fall through the bottom. But anyway, we went back and forth there for about a week, and then finally we got to go ahead, and we landed just like walking off, you know, walking off the boat onto the beach, and there wasn't anything there. But anyway, we went there several, I don't know, you know, I don't know the topography as well as I should, but anyway, we spent about 10 days there or something like that. And they finally North Korea had, you might say, folded. There wasn't anything. We didn't have hardly any contact with anybody, and so we had one operation. They called it Operation Mousetrap, and they assigned an Easy Company to go out in the middle of the field where there wasn't any, any defenses.
No cover.
We're just out in the field.
So it's bait.
Rock, and you couldn't dig a foxhole. We just out there. And the idea, according to what regiment told us, is we as bait, put out there supposedly undefended, and if there was any Koreans around, why they were supposed to attack us, And we spent about 2 or 3 days out there, and nobody showed up, so they took us back then and loaded us on trucks, and we went up Hungnam and up on Chosin Reservoir. And up until that time, while we were on Operation Mousetrap, why the only thing we had was a wool sleeping bag. And when it got cold, I tell you what, you froze to death. And we didn't have anything but ordinary, cotton socks and dungarees. I mean, boondockers, and so we were out there, you might say, freezing our tail off, and they finally come around and issued us down sleeping bag and snow packs and parkas. And
do you remember where you were at that point? Was that Hagaru-ri maybe?
Well, that was before we got to Hagaru-ri.
Okay.
It was, we were at Hungnam, in that area, before we started up the mountain. And going up the mountain was kind of an experience. I mean, it wasn't too awful dangerous, but it was just, the road was just wide enough for a truck. And they would just switch back all the way up. And I don't remember how many miles, but I think it's about 5 or 6 up to the top.
Were you walking or were you on a truck?
We were walking. We had trucks, but they were carrying supplies and that sort of thing. And we walked to the top, and then it was about, I don't remember the distances well anymore, but 9 or 10 miles from the top to Hagaru-ri. And when I got to Hagaru-ri, it was late in the evening. I mean, it was almost dark, and the town was completely empty. There wasn't anybody there, and so a lot of the towns, the houses had courtyards built up around them. They were walls about, I'd say 6-7 feet high. And
these rock walls?
They were made out of clay and straw. I mean, that's what all the Korean buildings were made out of. They put up a frame out of pine logs, and then they fill it in with wire, and then it was like stucco, and they used rice straw and clay.
Huh.
And they were about, wall would be about that thick. And of course, the doors were all sliding, you know, and the doors were covered with paper, you know, like years ago, you know, that they didn't have glass.
Right.
And they didn't have any windows. They just had doors, and that's all they had. But anyway, my squad, we just went into this courtyard and, you know, just sacked out. There wasn't anything, we didn't have to dig a foxhole or anything like that. But the next day, after that, why, somehow or rather, I don't know what the reconnaissance was, but somehow or other they found out that the Chinese were in the area. And so they took my squad out on the edge of town, and they were in the process, I'm going to say, of planning out the airport. And so we were on the east side of where the airport was, and then other part of the regiment were over on the west side. And anyway, there was a little hut there, and we were assigned to dig a foxhole out there, machine gun, you know, emplacement. And the ground was frozen about that deep. I mean, it was bad. We couldn't take an ordinary shovel, you know, like that we use for digging a foxhole, and dig it, because it just bend the point.
Right.
And you could take your pickmatic and chip it away. Anyway, there was an old elderly couple that lived in this little hut, and they seen us out there trying to dig a machine gun emplacement. And so Papa-san brought us some charcoal coals and put it on the ground and thawed it out enough so we could dig it out, you know. And they were the nicest people. Of course, I don't know how old he was, but I'm going to say he's 70. And Mama-san was about the same age. And I'm going to say it was the foxhole, I mean the machine gun emplacement was about from here to the road out there from the house. And so they took us in.
Oh, wow.
And we just have 4 hours on duty and then four off and back and forth. Anyway, they took us in, let us sleep in the house, and Mama-san cooked our food for us. Of course, they didn't have any food, but we shared what we had, you know, with them. But she took care of our, you know, feeding us, and we could sleep inside the building, which is better than being out in the cold when you're 20 below zero.
Sure, definitely. Get out of that wind at least.
You bet. But we was there about, I don't know, a week or so. And then they moved us over on the west side of the airstrip.
When would this have been? You know, would it have been November or so, 1950?
Yeah.
Late November, maybe?
We had Thanksgiving
Okay.
at Hagaru.
Did they feed you pretty good?
Yeah, they did. I mean, I can't complain. They flew in turkey, and we had turkey and dressing and cranberry sauce and had hot rolls. The only trouble was that you didn't have a place to eat it, except out, So they dish it up, and you take it out someplace if you could find a place to sit down to eat. By the time you got out there, it was ice.
I can imagine.
But anyway, they did the best that they could to feed us.
So how did they get supplies in there? Did they truck them in, or did they ever do airdrops or anything like that?
At that time, they could truck them in because the Chinese hadn't really struck us yet. But the day after Thanksgiving, we had orders to go north. And so Easy Company went first, and they got up to the Yellow River, and then Fox Company went second, and they made it about halfway. And Dog Company was in reserve, and Weapons Company and Headquarters Company and all the rest of the regimental. Well, Hagaru-ri was the 1st Marine Division headquarters at that time. And so anyway, we were given orders to move to the west side of the airstrip. And that's when the Chinese attacked. I mean, they caught us spread out, you might say. Easy Company way up on the Yellow, and Fox Company's about halfway. They were picked off at the pass, and we were on the airstrip. And I can remember very vividly, there was a hill out on the west side, I'd say maybe a quarter of a mile. And we could see them. There was a commanding officer or whatever, and he would put a cape up over his face like this, and then he'd bring it down, and they'd sound the bugle, and and all of the Chinese you could hear them. They'd yell. I don't know, it wasn't hooray or anything like that, but whatever the Chinese used for that sort of thing. But they do that, and he covers. And then back and blow the bugle, and they'd all, just, that went on for, I guess, 30 minutes. And then it quit. And it wasn't 30 minutes. And boy, here they came. I mean, there's this road. Of course, we had wire, concertina wire stretched up along the road, and these Chinese had come, just dead run, just as fast as they could, and of course we had machine guns, we had tank. I think there was 2 machine gun emplacements there, but we just mowed them down.
That sounds like suicide on their part.
Yeah.
To charge
and
into that.
They just kept coming. They just kept coming. Just kept coming. And they finally piled up along that concertina wire to where they could just run over the top. And that concertina wire just not been there, just kind of like a bridge. I mean, they just ran and, I mean, they covered everything up. And we fired those machine guns until they were red hot. I mean, they got so hot that the barrels just bent.
Starting to warp, yeah.
Yeah. And you'd fire a machine gun, you couldn't no more hit where you was aiming. It was just like a scatter gun out there. But it was something else. And then the next day, we had to go out on the airstrip, and we picked up all these Chinese bodies and loaded them up in the truck, and the engineers just bulldozed out a trench, and we just threw them in there and covered them up.
How many do you think there were there?
Oh gosh, I'm going to say 300.
Wow.
They just, just mangled. I think we had 3 different truck details, picking them up off the airport. But they had almost made it to the company headquarters. But they didn't. That was quite an experience.
I can imagine. Well, let's take a little bit of a break for a minute, and we'll get started again just in a couple minutes here. Okay, Mr. Depner, we just finished up. When we stopped a second ago, you were talking about the airfield there at Hagaru-ri and you guys repelling that first Chinese attack. What happened after that?
Well, they came by after about the next day, and they formed a group from different parts of. Some of them were from headquarters company and some of them from weapons company. But anyway, we formed a group that we were going to try to make contact with Fox Company.
They were farther up the road?
Yeah, they were halfway between Hagaru and the Yellow River, and they were all trapped, surrounded by the Chinese, and we were going to try and break through and make contact with them, and so anyway, we went out, and I don't know, we didn't make it all the way, but we got about halfway there, and we ran across an ambulance that the Chinese had shot and left on the road, blocked the road where we couldn't get through. And so we tried 2 different ways to get around by going up hills, And we finally made it to the top of the pass, and we were going to set up a 50 caliber machine gun that we'd taken off the Jeep that was with us. And we got up there, and the fellow that was supposed to brought the tripod didn't.
Oops.
So we didn't have any way to set the 50 caliber machine gun up. We had the machine gun, we had the ammo, but we didn't have the tripod.
Was that Tong Pass?
Yeah.
Okay.
And anyway, we were up there and just right on the crest of the hill where we could look over into, the Chinese. And so we had to go back since we didn't have the tripod. And they assigned me and my gunner to stay there and lay down fire in case, they came. So I was there, and the Chinese come over in the pass, and there was a little break where the trail was, and this Chinaman come up, and he had a tripod, and he was fixing to lay it down in that, and I caught him right in the middle, and knocked him over backwards.
Was that with a machine gun or a carbine?
It's carbine. And so I stayed there anyway, and wasn't another minute or so, then another one come up, and I went to fire my carbine, and it wouldn't fire. The only thing I had was one hand grenade. And so I took that hand grenade and pulled the pin, and I counted one and threw it in that hole just as quick as I could. And it went off. But anyway, I looked around, I got to wondering why Sheldon hadn't fired, because he should have been close enough. And I looked around and he wasn't there.
That probably wasn't too good of a feeling.
So I took off. And I took off down this open rice paddy, And I could see that the company, the squad that was down there, they could see me coming. And of course, whoever, I guess, come up after I threw that hand grenade, while they were shooting, but they just kicking up dirt all around where I was running. But anyway, I made it back, and we went on back to the company then, since we didn't have any way of completing our mission. And the next day, the Easy Company and Fox Company made it back. And so we were all together again at Hagaru-ri, what was left of us. And so we set out from there to come back to fight our way back out.
What was the weather like at that point?
Well, it was cold and windy, but it was clear. And they assigned us to Easy Company, and Easy Company was assigned a point to come down the road, and Dog Company was supposed to be on our right, Fox Company was supposed to be on our left, and they had the convoy all lined up, and so me and my squad leader and one other boy was assigned a point to come out, and so we led the convoy coming down the road, and we made it about, I'm going to say about 3.5, 4 miles, and the railroad is on the left-hand side, and it was elevated above the road that we were on, and we got down about 3 or 4 miles where there was a, I don't know what you call it, a culvert or something under the railroad track, and when we went by where the Chinese had a machine gun emplacement in that, under the track, in that, I guess you'd call it a bridge really, but anyway, they opened fire on us, and we had to hit the deck off in the ditch, and company commander hollered at us, "Move on." So we got out and went on down the road, but Fox Company then come in and cleared out that machine gun emplacement, and so that the convoy could move on. And we made it to Hagaru-ri that night. I'm going to say it's about 4 o'clock, and they had warming tent for us to get in to warm.
So were you trying to get everything that you could out of Hagaru-ri? I mean, did you get all your supplies, or did you just leave those, or?
We took everything that we could get. I mean, we didn't, the tanks and trucks and, you know, everything, anything that we couldn't take, we burned.
Right.
Destroyed.
So you had food and everything on your way out.
Well, that's kind of a joke in a way. While this was going on, the only way that we could get any supplies was for them to bring them in and parachute them in, and they'd drop them on the airstrip, and then we'd go out and, you know, I say we, I never did, but whoever was in charge would go out and get that supplies and bring them to us. And the last shipment that we were supposed to get was our sea rations, and instead of being sea rations, they sent us Tootsie Rolls.
Tootsie Rolls?
Tootsie Rolls, the big ones, they're about that long, you know, and about yay big around. I mean, the whole drop was nothing but Tootsie Rolls. And so instead of getting sea rations, that's what we got.
I guess they did that on purpose?
No,
or they just shipped you the wrong thing?
I've heard, you know, different tales about that, but anyway, that's what we had. And of course they were froze hard as a rock, and we'd take our K-bar, or break off a piece and put it in your mouth, you know, and you'd hold it in there about 5 or 10 minutes, they'd thaw out enough that you could chew it. But it was, in a way, it was a blessing, because it was quick energy, you know. If it had been sea rations, a can of beans, you couldn't have cooked it anyway.
Right.
So, you know, it was, we joked about it, you know, having Tootsie Rolls instead of C rations, but in a way it was kind of a blessing to us. But anyway, that night then we had to go climb up the mountain. Dog company was having a firefight on the right-hand side of the mountain, and so we had to go up, and we passed through their positions and took our positions. And that night it snowed, about 3 inches of snow, and they were having to install a bridge that the Chinese had blown out at the top of the pass, and the engineers got that done that night, I guess, or anyway, the next day. Why, we went down the hill, and they had the bridge put in. It wasn't a bridge, it was just two beams that went across, you know, from one side to the other, and you had to hit them, you know, right, because there wasn't anything in the middle, and there wasn't anything, you know, right. But anyway, I got down there, and we were still on the point, and they had a bulldozer, and we rode the bulldozer across the bridge, and we got to the other side where they let us off, and my squad leader assigned me to be a guard on that bridge, and so the rest of the division went by me on that, and I watched every truck and Jeep and tank. And
so what was that like, watching them go by?
It was unbelievable. Of course, you couldn't tell who anybody was, you know, their parkas were over their face, but nobody had shaved, you know, in a month, I guess, you know, and their breath would be frozen, and their beard, you know, and all you could see would be the top part, and then from here it'd just be like a coat of ice, you know, and they were walking, and most of them that could walk, that were wounded, you know, they'd be using their rifle for a crutch, you know, to go across. Every truck nearly was full, you know, but wounded of some kind. Of course, they had flown out most of the wounded, you know, that weren't able to walk. They'd flown them out from Hagaru-ri, but the rest of them were in the trailers. A lot of the dead were in trailers, and they were stacked up, you know, rounded up. And
these were dead Marines.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a sad sight to see them all. I mean, it's just unbelievable, really, what condition that they were in, and still, you know, going on. And my squad leader, when he put me on the guard post, said, "Now we'll come back and get you, you know, after everybody goes through." And so I seen the last Jeep go through, you know. And I waited and I waited and I waited and I waited some more. And finally, it got to be dark. I mean, and the wind was blowing. I tell you what, it was colder.
And so the whole division had already passed through?
Right.
And you're still out there?
I'm still out there.
Huh.
And it wasn't long, and I could hear the Chinese. You know, they were going up on top of the ridge across from where I was. Of course, I don't know Chinese, so I don't know what they were saying, but they was just you know, chattering just like running off. And so I figured, well, it's me and them. I took off down the pass. I went down the mountain, and I went on down the mountain. It's, I don't know, 5 or 6 miles down there. And I got down to the bottom, and I could see the road, you know, kind of flatten out. And here in front of me was looked like something I'd never seen before. It looked like a great big huge rock, and then up at the top there were 2 slits about like that, you know. It looked like a green-eyed monster, you know. And I thought, what in the world have I run into? I didn't have any idea. I thought, you know, if this is Chinese, I'm in trouble. But anyway, the road had flattened out, and of course there's a bunch of rocks over here on this side. And I thought, well, I've got one choice. I'm just going to have to go over them rocks and out through this rice paddy, get away from whatever this is. Well, I hadn't taken about 2 or 3 steps towards those rocks, and they challenged me, you know, and it was American, so I felt a little bitter about that, you know. And they said, who goes there, you know? And so I told them who I was, name, rank, serial number, and all that, like you're supposed to do. And so they called me forward, and what this monster was an anti-aircraft gun, one of them double pom-pom deals, you know. And they had covered it up with a tarp, so that the little slits of light was through the tarp that they had covered over these guns. And they had, what they had done was they put gasoline lanterns inside to keep the diesel and the firing mechanism warm enough so they could fire it if they needed to. And anyway, the sentry that was on duty said, you crawl in there and lay on top of that track, and said, go to sleep. And boy, I was thankful for that. So I crawled in there underneath that tarp, and about 2 or 3 times during the night, somebody came by and they'd crank up the diesel and keep it warm enough, you know, so they could. The next morning, the officer of the day came by, and the secretary told him, you know, that he had me there. And so the guy said, there's a supply depot about a half a mile up the road. Said, if you make it up there, you can probably get a ride, you know, back to Hunam. So I took off as fast as I could. I tried to run, but I couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
My feet was frozen, and but I walked as fast as I could, and I got up there just as they was loading the last trailer, and so I got on. They said, "Now you get on this trailer, and you can ride shotgun for me." So I got up there on top of the trailer and covered up with boxes, crates, and whatever I could cover up with. But anyway, I rode back on this supply train. It was a Army supply train. They had a diesel Caterpillar and I don't know, 4, 5, 6 track trailers. And they took me on back to their base. I don't remember where it was, but anyway, they took me back to this base, and when they got me back there, they said, stop, told me to get off, said, there's the mess tent. So I got off and went in the mess tent, and they fixed me beef and gravy and biscuits. I mean, you know, treated me real good. They said, now there's the shower tent. Pointed over there where it was. Said, you go over there and you can take a shower and get some clean clothes. So, boy, I took off over there, and my feet was bad. Anyway, I gathered up some snow and I put my feet in my helmet full of snow, and when the snow began to feel warm, I knew I was getting feeling back in the feet. So I got to take a shower. They gave me a Army khaki shirt, wool khaki shirt, which was warm and nice, you know, and some wool socks that I hadn't had, and I mean, they treated me right. Guy come by and he said, I've got some stationery if you want to write home. So I got to write my mother a letter, and I don't know, I guess I was there 3 or 4 hours, and a guy come by and said, we've got a supply truck going to Nam. Said, you're welcome to ride along. Said that they can drop you off at the 1st Marine Division. So I went out there and jumped in that truck, and they took me right to the 1st Marine Division, and took me right to where my company was, and my company was loading on the truck at that time to go to Nam to get on board the ship to go to Busan. So I just made it there in time. But we got to Nam, stayed there for about an hour or so. We got to scavenge all of the candy piles and everything. And they loaded us up on this ship. And of course it was just overcrowded, you know. But they fed us beans and warm bread. And I tell you what, that tasted as good as any banquet I've ever had.
I bet you.
Boy, it was really good. But they fed us that night and the next morning, and then we were in Busan, and they took us from Busan to Mason by truck. They had a tent city set up there, And the next morning, I went to sick bay, and they sent me right to the hospital. Said I had pneumonia, and so I stayed there 2 or 3 days in the hospital. And while I was in there, they moved me from weapons company to motor transport. And so from there, for the rest of my tour of duty there, I was in motor transport company. I stayed with motor transport company until October. And they finally got around to shipping me back to the States.
Speaking of going back to the States, did you keep in touch with home at all while you were over there? Did you write much in the way of letters, receive any letters?
Oh yeah. We had mail call, you know, pretty regular. I corresponded with my mother more than anything else, and I had a girlfriend that wrote me occasionally, but I was glad to, you know, get my papers to come back to the States.
I bet you were. So did you ever run into or have any interaction with any of the Allied troops that were there, the forces from other countries like the British or any of those guys?
Yeah. After we went to Wonsan, we were, of course, the North Koreans had pretty well, you know, folded up. They wasn't doing very much. But anyway, I was assigned guard duty one night, and at the post where at the position where I had guard duty, there was a Turk from the Turkish brigade and South Korean, and we were all, you know, couldn't communicate very much, you know. But anyway, I spent a day on guard duty with this Turk. And I mean, he was a character. I wouldn't want her to tangle with him at all. He carried those little curved daggers, you know, and he just acted like he just liked to cut somebody's throat with that. But that was really the only time that I had.
Sorry. It's okay.
I had any duty with from other countries. We had, I didn't come in contact with them, but there was a British Marine group that was with us that came back from Hagaru-ri, but I didn't have any contact with them. I mean, they were with a different group than I was. But we had other countries, you know, that were involved there, but I just wasn't in a position to make contact with them.
Did you ever run into civilians much? Korean civilians?
Well,
I mean, I know you talked a little bit about the Papa-san and Mama-san when you were up at Hagaru-ri, I guess, but maybe did you ever have any contact once you got back and kind of switched duties to the motor transport?
can't say I didn't have any contact, but it was limited,
Mhm.
you know. There were vendors, I guess you'd call them, Koreans that would go to our garbage pit,
Uh-huh.
and they'd gather up all of the tin cans, the beer cans, and you know, that sort of thing. And they'd take those beer cans and cut them up, and they'd make lamps and dolls and
Huh.
you know, just all kinds of creative stuff.
Right.
And then they'd come back and they'd try and sell it to us. And that, you know, that was kind of interesting because they were talented people. I mean, you know, they made some pretty novel things,
Uh-huh.
but I didn't buy any because I wasn't going to carry it with me. But they sold a lot of stuff, you know.
Uh-huh.
Guys that buy something maybe for their kids or girlfriend or whatever, you know,
Uh-huh.
and mail it back. But it was quite an interesting thing.
So you said you shipped out in October of 51?
Right. October of 51. And that was kind of an experience too. We were in the, I can't even remember the name of the valley, but anyway, we were set up in this valley and there was a little landing strip.
Uh-huh.
And they gave us orders to, you know, to ship out and come back home. And they had this, I guess it was a C-47,
Mm-hmm.
anyway, a cargo plane. And they had it on this landing strip, and all of the Marines that were being shipped out at that particular time, they came by and opened the door and threw out a cargo net. If you know what a cargo net is. And we had to climb up that rope cargo net to get in the plane, you know. And once we got in the plane, well, there was a bench on both sides, you know. Of course, they had windows.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember very, very plainly, you know, we finally got everybody loaded in there. There wasn't but, I'd say, maybe 10 of us at that time. Might have been more or less, I don't. But anyway, they had windows where you could see out, you know. And so we got down there and they closed the door and they cranked that thing up and taxied down to the end of the runway and turned it around, you know, and they pulled the throttle back and revved that thing up and the wings just started flopping. The motors quit.
Oh. Well, that's not
I
good.
thought, boy, this is something.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, they fooled around and it coughed and sputtered and they got it cranked up again and they wound that thing up and the wings went to flopping and they took off down that strip and there's a big mountain right at the end of this valley. And boy, I mean, it looked like there wasn't no way to get over that. And he fairly just cleared that mountain getting out. And I thought, I'm not going to drive any of these anymore. But anyway, they took me from there to Busan, and they loaded us aboard an Army transport ship.
Uh-huh.
And it was one that they used to bring wives and kids and, you know, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so those of us who weren't Army personnel were restricted, you know. You stay right here in this area, because the rest of the ship had all of the dependents from Army personnel. And but anyway, it was a nice ship.
Huh.
I mean, it was a big one, and we rode that all the way back to San Francisco. Can't even think of the name of the island, but island in San Francisco Bay. And I was kind of glad to get home.
Yep. So were you discharged after that, or were you in a while longer?
No. I got leave. I don't remember how many days. 2 weeks, I guess. And then I was assigned to motor transport in Camp Pendleton, and I wasn't too pleased with that. But anyway, I asked for a transfer, and they transferred me down to Troop Training Unit in Coronado Island in California. And so that's where I went from. The troop training unit that I was assigned to we taught how to waterproof vehicles for amphibious landings. And we had 2 units, one in San Diego and one in Formosa.
Huh.
But I never did have to go to Formosa.
Yeah.
Every time that it came up for rotation, why, there was always somebody that was in Formosa that wanted to stay there.
Huh.
And so I never had to go. But anyway, I stayed there from, I don't remember, November, I guess, 51 until February of 53.
Okay. Is that when you finally got out of the service? Yeah. So what did you do then? Did you go back to Montana?
No. While I was in San Diego, I got married, and when after we got discharged, she got discharged first, and then me. And after I got discharged, when I got married, I had gone up and got a trailer house from my brother, and that's what we lived in at Coronado. And so after I got discharged, I had to take that trailer back to him. And then I came across to Montana, and I don't know, I guess we was there maybe a week, but anyway, I loaded up all of whatever I had in Montana, and I had a little trailer there pulled behind a car, and we came to Big Ranch.
Okay.
And then I stayed there.
Is that where she was from? Was Big
Yeah,
Bang?
that's where she was from. And I stayed the next term of school. In September, I started at AFCC. And I stayed at, let's see, from 53 to 59. I graduated the last time, master's degree. But anyway.
So you ended up teaching?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I taught school at south side of B Branch, and I was superintendent of schools at Allred, and then I was principal at south side again, and then I was superintendent at south side, and then I took a job as a assistant principal at McClellan High School in Little Rock.
Oh.
And that was a year of integration.
Mm-hmm.
And so rather than stay the second year, I opted to go back to Van Buren County.
Uh-huh.
And I went to Clinton,
Right.
taught school there for, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 years. And then I went back to Southside until I graduated. 85.
So how long did you end up being in the education field? Between teaching and principal and all?
29 years, I think.
Wow. So let me ask you, what's your lasting impression of Korea or your time over there?
Well, I really, really don't know how to answer that. There's mixed emotions, I guess you'd say, because you remember the bad times, but there were some pretty good times over there too. The people over there are pretty nice people, really.
Mm-hmm.
They're like anybody else. They're just like people around here.
Mm-hmm.
They're not any different, but the circumstances that you're in are not exactly, what you'd like for it to be. I remember when we were over there, some of the kids, the younger ones, they take up with you, and they not necessarily they couldn't talk to you, but they were friendly,
Mm-hmm.
and you could have them do things for you. Kind of have to do it by sign language, but some of those kids were really, really nice.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not all bad, I'll put it that way. North Korea, you've got 2 different groups. Those that
Mm-hmm.
are in control are not necessarily good,
Right.
but the average peasant, person is just like anybody you'd meet downtown.
Mm-hmm.
They're friendly, they do anything for you, you treat them right, they'll treat you right. And I don't know, it's kind of hard to really categorize.
Sure. So
But
do you,
they're by and large pretty nice folks.
yeah. So do you think the United States made the right decision sending you guys over there?
Yeah, I do. I think it was necessary, you know. I mean, we were probably not given the same appreciation in this country as over there. Those folks over there appreciated what we did, and they still do. I don't think that they're the type of people that would turn on you. I really feel like that they're appreciative enough of what we did to, you know, it's a lasting sort of thing anyway.
Well, that sounds good. We surely enjoyed visiting with you today, and glad to hear about your experiences during the Korean War.
Well, we weren't heroes, I don't think, but necessarily we did what we had to do. And
Right.
I was very fortunate, or I think I was, in that I went through all of that with, you know, with the same chores, so to speak, same duty as a lot of others that didn't make it. You know, and when you think about those that didn't make it or that were hurt, they were very unfortunate. But I was well blessed, and the good Lord took care of me, you know, that I was able to go through all of that and not be hurt.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, thanks again. We really appreciate that.